Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm Jordan and welcome to my September monthly reading wrap up. This one is going to look a little bit different from my normal wrap-ups, mainly because as the months have been going on and I've started reading more and more books every month, I honestly dread making wrap-ups. The idea of sitting down and telling you about the 21 books that I read in September, just one after the other, it's not fun to me, especially when I feature so many of the books that I read in reading vlogs and stuff. It just feels repetitive and boring and long-winded, so I will be looking for a way to switch up monthly wrap-ups into the future, but for this month I thought it would be fun to do something that I see my friend Jan over on her channel Jan Agaton do for her reading wrap-ups, where she does the reread, rewrite, or burn tag or challenge for all of the books that she's read. I thought that might be something fun to try this month to see if like the game format works for me a little bit better, but we will see. Before I get into that little game, I have some general statistics to go over from the month. So in September, I read 21 books. As far as the genres that I read, nothing new here. I read the most mystery, thriller, horror books with 9 total. I read 5 contemporary or romance books. I read 2 science fictions, 2 nonfictions, 2 fantasies, and 1 historical fiction. So definitely a range of genres there, which I like to see. As far as formats and how I consumed these books, I listened by far to the most audiobooks, with 15 of the 21 being via audio. I read 5 of the books completely physically, and I read 1 of the books via ebook. And I might talk about this a little bit more later, but this is because I was doing a book club challenge during the month of September. I was playing a TBR game, Jeopardy, in the online book club that I'm a part of, so I definitely was flying through the audiobooks and reading fewer books that were on my physical TBR and reading them physically. As far as ratings for the month go, I had 0 1 stars, 5 2 stars, 9 3 stars, 5 4 stars, and 2 5-star books. That is a pretty typical distribution of ratings there. And then as far as content, 7 of the books that I read were for videos, and I have featured in reading vlogs and things on my channel, so I will link those below. 10 of the books were for fun, were not for videos, and again, all or most of those were for that reading challenge that I was completing. And then actually 4 of the books were for a failed video, or I was intending to read them for a readathon and put up a vlog for that, but it never ended up seeing the light of day. So those 4 books kind of go in the random category of I haven't talked about them yet, but I did read them intending for them to go into a video. So let's go ahead and get into the wrap up of the books that I read. So I have all of the book titles in this mug here. I will pick out 3 titles at a time, and out of those 3 titles I have to pick the one that I would reread, the one that I would rewrite, and the one that I would burn if I had to. And with that, I'll talk a little bit about the synopses and my thoughts, but the goal here is to keep this moving, keep it fun. So let's go ahead with the first 3 books. So the first one that I have is Misery by Stephen King. Then we have Dolores Claiborne by Stephen King. And then we have The Nanny by Gilly McMillan, or Gilly McMillan, not sure how to pronounce that. So all of these are 3-star books. And 2 of them, the 2 Stephen King books, were for that failed video that I talked about. I was hoping to participate in the Losers Club readathon hosted by 3 of my friends here on BookTube, which is Stephen King themed, and I had a whole stack of Stephen King books I was planning to read that week, but life got a little bit busy, so I didn't get around to it, but I did end up reading 4 Stephen King books throughout the month. So here are 2 of them. Misery by Stephen King is about a fangirl of this author and a book series he's written, and he writes the final book in the series, and this fangirl is not satisfied with the ending, so she kidnaps the author, holds him hostage, and basically makes him rewrite that last book in the series. Dolores Claiborne is a book about a housekeeper who is being investigated for the murder of one of the people in the house that she was taking care of, and she's basically telling the story of why she is innocent or what happened to that guy. And then The Nanny by Gilly McMillan is about a nanny for a family who all of a sudden one day picked up all of her stuff and left. The child that was being nannied never really knew what happened to the nanny to cause her to leave, and now that she's an adult, she's looking into it more. This is really difficult because, again, all of these were 3 stars, so I have pretty meh opinions about all of them. This was harder than I was expecting. The book that I would reread is Dolores Claiborne. It was a little long-winded to me, and it felt like a lot of time spent in this one woman's head, and she is just going on like a monologue about what happened. And I feel like I might have zoned out a little bit, and I would probably choose to reread this one to just listen a little bit closer, because I did enjoy most of the story and how things all came together. And I think that upon reread, I would pick up on even more clues and things that would make it all make sense and enjoyable. I think I would rewrite Misery. I really liked the idea of this, and I've heard such hype around this book, but it didn't quite live up to those expectations for me. If I were to rewrite it, I would make it a little bit more action-packed, a little bit more thrilling, and just pump it up in intensity a little bit. And then The Nanny by Gillian Macmillan, I would burn. All right, the next three books, we've got When the Sky Fell on Splendor by Emily Henry, Things We Never Got Over by Lucy Score, and Carrie by Stephen King. So When the Sky Fell on Splendor is a young adult sci-fi book. I read this for the Upside Down Readathon, so I will link my vlog because I definitely go more in depth with my thoughts about that book in that video. Things We Never Got Over is a contemporary romance book that I've seen a lot around. I've seen the cover around Bookstagram and stuff, but I never really knew what it was about. And then Carrie by Stephen King, obviously a classic. I'm going to go ahead and say I would burn Carrie. I did not enjoy reading this time around. I know that I read it in high school, but I definitely was not an avid reader at that time. I didn't know how to review books or even think about my feelings on books, but reading it now as an adult, I have a lot of issues with it. I ended up rating it 2 stars. It was just not it for me, and I honestly don't think it would have to exist in the world, so I'm gonna say burn it. The book that I would rewrite is Things We Never Got Over. Like I mentioned, this was a contemporary romance book, but it was so long. I don't remember exactly how long it was, but it was just very like angsty and meandering and mundane, and I would tighten that up. I would shorten it, just get to the good parts, and that's just my personal preference in contemporary romance books. I also didn't really enjoy that book. I gave it 2 stars. And then that leaves my reread as When the Sky Fell on Splendor. I feel like that would be easy enough. It's a young adult sci-fi like I mentioned, so it was a quick read. I wasn't super impressed with it. I gave it 3 stars, but I definitely had the least problems with it out of all of these books, so a reread would be okay with me. Okay, next 3 books. We've got The Violin Conspiracy by Brendan Slocum, Take Back Your Power by Deborah Liu, and Stay Close by Harlan Coben. Okay, off the bat, the burn is easy. I'm gonna say Stay Close by Harlan Coben. I gave this one 2 stars. I honestly remember nothing about the book. I did feature it in a reading vlog recently where I tried books from different celebrity book clubs. So if you wanna see more in-depth thoughts, go there, but it's basically like a suburban crime book, which are 2 subgenres within mystery thrillers that I just don't gravitate towards, so I did not like this one. The other 2 books is a hard choice because I really enjoyed both of them. The Violin Conspiracy by Brendan Slocum is also featured in that video I just mentioned. This is a mystery book about this Black classical violinist who is trying to be successful in his music career, and he has obtained this really expensive $10 million violin throughout his life, and it gets stolen the night before a really big important competition for him. And the book is all about his past, how he got to where he is now, as well as solving that mystery of where his violin has gone. I loved it so much, I gave it 5 stars. And then Take Back Your Power by Deborah Liu is a nonfiction book written by a female executive, basically giving advice to other women who are trying to succeed in their careers. I gave this book 4 stars, and I can't think of anything that I would specifically rewrite in it, but I would probably choose this one as the rewrite option, just because there are a lot of books out there like this, and I've read a lot of this information before. However, I do think it's the type of information that is good to reread and remind yourself of every so often. So it's like a both category. I would reread it, but I would rewrite it to add maybe a little bit more nuanced information that you haven't heard 100 times before, to just give it a little bit more oomph and separate it a little bit more from other self-help books. And then I would reread The Violin Conspiracy because it is perfection. There is definitely nothing that I would add to this book or change about it. So by default, it has to be the reread, and it is my favorite book of this whole month. Spoiler, and definitely the one I would recommend all of you go out and read as soon as possible. We've got A Coin for the Ferryman by Megan Edwards, One Word Kill by Mark Lawrence, and Gerald's Game by Stephen King. This is interesting. I think the book that I would reread is going to be Gerald's Game. I have seen the movie for this and I really enjoyed it, so I was hoping to love the book as much as I liked the movie. Unfortunately, I didn't quite. I only ended up rating it 3 stars. I was a little bit underwhelmed, but at this point, it's a story that I know pretty well after watching the movie and having read the book, so one more reread would be fine. I would be able to fly through it. I am going to say I would rewrite One Word Kill. This is a young adult sci-fi book that has a little bit to do with like alternate realities, parallel universes, time travel kind of thing. In theory and in synopsis, this sounded so good. This was my buddy read book that I chose for the Upside Down Readathon, which again, I'll link that vlog. But the execution of this book was just not there. I gave it 2 stars, and I would definitely rewrite this book to be just different in a lot of ways. I would add way more explanation about what was actually happening. I would take out a couple of storylines that never really went anywhere or just felt extraneous and like they were added for no reason. And I would just bring this book up to par with like the Blake Crouch and Andy Weir books that I love so much and that I was hoping this one would be similar to. And that means I would burn a coin for the ferryman, which is honestly correct because this is a historical fiction book also with a time travel element that I just found extremely boring. It had a lot of like history in it. It basically follows these historians who find this coin that allows them to time travel, and they think that they are supposed to use it to change something in the past for the better. So they go about doing that. Definitely didn't work for me, was way too long. I got bored and confused, so a burn is right. Okay, I think I have 3 rounds left. So the next 3 books are Queen of the Tiles by Hannah Alkoff, The Book of Two Ways by Jodi Picoult, and Clues to the Universe by Christina Lee. Interesting because this is 3 4-star books that I read this month, so I generally enjoyed them all. The one that I think I'm going to choose as reread, my favorite out of all of these, is Queen of the Tiles by Hannah Alkoff. This is a young adult mystery book about a girl whose best friend died a year prior at a Scrabble tournament, and she is at another Scrabble tournament now, basically trying to solve that mystery. And it's a really fun combination of murder mystery and Scrabble expertise. So I loved it, gave it 4 stars, and it is featured in the Upside Down Readathon blog as well if you would like more thoughts. Book that I would rewrite, I'm gonna say The Book of Two Ways by Jodi Picoult. This was a very thought-provoking, interesting book about a woman who is traveling home from this trip, and she's on the airplane and like turbulence happens, she gets in a crash, and she basically gets the opportunity to choose between 2 different directions in her life. So it's one of those like sliding doors type books where we get to see both ways of her life play out. I wish I remembered a little bit more about why exactly I gave this book 4 stars instead of 5 stars, and that's what I would obviously change in a rewrite. I think I would just make it a little bit more impactful at the end, give some kind of, I don't know, twist or punch or something to just really hit home the emotional nature of this book. I think it got like 90% of the way there, and I would just add a little something to bring it all the way. But overall, I really did enjoy that book. And then unfortunately, that means I'm going to burn Clues to the Universe by Christina Lee. This is a young adult book about 2 teenagers who kind of happenstance like exchange items at school and end up with each other's notebooks, and so they get a little bit of a glimpse inside this other person. They're not sure who it is. Eventually they reconnect and they become friends, and they help each other like solve some mysteries about each of their lives. This was really good, so I'm sad to burn it. I definitely wouldn't burn it in real life if I didn't have to for this challenge. I guess my only justification for doing so is that for me, it's pretty run-of-the-mill YA. Like, I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars, but it was not life-changing to me, and I don't know that it necessarily would be for anyone. So in that regard, I guess you could burn it and it would be fine. There are 100 other similar YA books to fill its place, but those aren't my true feelings. I wouldn't burn it if I didn't have to. Okay, my next 3 books are Heroine by Mindy McGinnis, Heartstopper Volume 2 by Alice Oseman, and Wolf Song by TJ Klune. Okay, Wolf Song by TJ Klune is a fantasy book, and I had to read this because it was another person's favorite book for that Jeopardy challenge, and unfortunately it is just not the book or genre for me. If I didn't have to read it for that challenge, I never would have. I would have known this wasn't for me. I gave it 2 stars. That's not necessarily because it was a bad book, it's just not a book for me, so I would burn it because I never want to read a book like that again. The book that I would reread, I'm gonna say Heroine by Mindy McGinnis, because this actually was a reread for me. This is one of my favorite books of all time. It is about a high school softball player who gets in a car accident. She gets addicted to her painkillers and eventually becomes addicted to heroin. And it just shows how that steep decline can happen and how addiction can happen to any person if they're in the right circumstances, even if, you know, everyone thinks that that would never happen to them. It's just a very real look at that world. So I love it. I reread it once, I would reread it again. And then that means I would rewrite Heartstopper Volume 2 by Alice Oseman, which is about right. I did give this 4 stars. I enjoy it. I did like it even more than the first volume. In general, I just find the contemporary graphic novel format to be lacking in what I look for in books. Like, I just wish there was more insight into what the characters are thinking, more words on the page about what's happening. I get that people like to look at the illustrations. I would just rather have more words and more information. So I guess that would be my rewrite, is to add more text, add a little more substance into the book, but maybe that's just not what graphic novels are supposed to be. Okay, and then we are down to the last 3 books. So we've got Somebody's Daughter by Ashley C. Ford, Book of 1,000 Days by Shannon Hale, and The Last to Vanish by Megan Miranda. I think these are all 3-star books, so a little hard to compare in this way, but I think I would say the book I would reread is Somebody's Daughter by Ashley C. Ford. This is a memoir written by Ashley C. Ford about her life, and specifically her relationship with like her family and her upbringing and her relationship with her parents and how they have formed her into the person she is today. I gave it 3 stars because I wasn't completely interested and invested in it, and I don't know if it's because I didn't know who Ashley C. Ford was before reading this memoir, or something in the writing style just didn't connect with me, but I do think it would be the most impactful to read again, so I would choose it as my reread. The book that I would rewrite is Book of 1,000 Days by Shannon Hale. This was a really cool book with a cool concept. It is a fairy tale retelling for a very unknown fairy tale. I don't actually know the name of what fairy tale it was retelling, but it was basically about this girl or woman who decided to be an attendant for this princess who was being banished into this tower for a whole bunch of years. Basically, the princess was refusing to marry this suitor, and so the king or whoever said, okay, princess, you're gonna be locked inside this tower then until you decide to marry this guy. And we get the perspective of the princess's attendant, who is basically keeping a journal of all of the days that are passing as they're locked in this tower. So that's why it's called Book of 1,000 Days, is because it's a journal of all of those 1,000 days. This was really interesting. It had some fantasy elements in it that weren't my favorite. I guess I would take those out if I was rewriting it. I would shorten up the book in general. It was a little bit long, dragged a little bit in the middle, but also that kind of conveyed the length of time that they were in the tower, so I understand that. But I would just add a little bit to make it a little more exciting, a little more suspenseful. But overall, it was an enjoyable experience and definitely better than I was expecting for a fairy tale retelling. And then that means the book that I would burn is The Last to Vanish by Megan Miranda, and that's just because this was a completely standard average mystery thriller by Megan Miranda. I haven't had the best luck with her as an author. This is about this town that is right next to a hiking trail that a lot of people like to hike at, and I think we're following this girl who works at like the hotel that a lot of hikers stay at, and the town has recently gotten some notoriety because a lot of hikers have gone missing recently, and we're following this girl who works at the hotel after someone comes looking for more information about his brother who just disappeared. They basically team up to solve that mystery. Honestly, nothing memorable about it. I also featured this book in the Upside Down Readathon vlog, so you can go there for a few more details about my thoughts, but I think I said basically the same thing of like, this did nothing for me, so I am okay with burning it for this tag. So that is it for the reread, rewrite, and burn tag version of my September wrap up. Let me know how you liked this format. I'm not sure that I completely got out all of my thoughts on all of these books as I would like to, but it was still fun changing it up and doing my wrap up in a little bit of a different way. But let me know if you have any thoughts or ideas on how to mix up or spice up the monthly wrap ups. I don't know what it is, but just sitting and talking about 21 books all in a row, it's draining to me. I don't like doing it. I don't like editing it. I don't like watching it, but I still want to have a record of the books that I read every month and my thoughts on them, especially the ones that I don't feature in reading vlogs. So let me know your thoughts and ideas, and let me know how your September reading month is. How many books did you read? What were your favorites? And I hope that your October is off to a good start. Other than that, I don't have anything else, so thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in my next one.